Okay, in this video, we're going to learn how to start adding the rest of your values for your contour portrait with the monochromatic color scheme. So remember, we started out by painting in all the black areas first with your darkest value from your color scale. Next, we're going to move on to the next darkest value, your darkest gray value, right? And so whatever you did for your next value in your color scale, that's what you're going to paint for the next value in your portrait. So that's what you're going to need to do right now is remix this same color. And the big reason you have the color scale to refer to is because when you're remixing this color, I want to make sure that I use about the same amounts of red and blue that I did last time, because I don't want to end up with a color that's a little bit too red or a little bit too blue. So for example, if I remixed my color and it looked like, sorry, I'm still remixing here, but if it looked like this, put this up here more, right? I can tell that that's a little bit too much blue in it because it's looking like too violety and not enough red. So you can even dab little bits of your colors that you mix on your scale or on another piece of little scratch paper to test them next to your color scale and make sure they're pretty accurate. So I'm gonna go ahead and mix my correct color, or at least as close as I can get it, which I think is about like that. That looks good. And then I'm going to carefully paint in the next areas of this color, of my darkest gray. So everything that was my darkest gray, I'm painting in with my number 2 value. Now, if you realize as you start painting in the color next to your darkest value, if you realize that there's not enough difference, like say this color was a little too dark that you were painting in, you could always adjust it a little bit. You could make it a little bit lighter than it was on your scale if you need to. The point is you need to see the change between the values. You don't want them to be so similar that you can't identify the difference between the two of them. So that's what I'm aiming for. Now, it may be tricky, depending on how detailed you got with your drawing, to be really specific with where you're putting your watercolor when you're doing it with a big brush. So if by any, oh, don't do that. I was talking and painting and I accidentally painted in the wrong spot. If that happens, dab it up as soon as you can. And you can even get a nice clean, just damp brush and try to take the rest of the water or the paint off. But the sooner you do that, the better before it dries. And usually you can get most of it off by doing that. I'll zoom in so you can see a little better. So anyway, that's the dangers of talking while painting. Okay. So what I was saying was, if you're having trouble controlling where your water's going, if it's getting outside of the lines, it might mean you have too much water on your brush, or it might mean you need a smaller brush. And if that's not something you have access to, I apologize. But they are really, really cheap. If you ever stop at like Michael's or Art Essentials, it's like $1 or $2 for just a really small paintbrush. So if you got really, really detailed with your drawing, that would be a good idea. Get a smaller brush. So I'm getting in the rest of my dark gray values. And once I'm done with my dark gray values, and I've gotten them in everywhere, and let me just finish painting this one in. So once I've gotten in my dark gray values, then I'm gonna move on to my next darker gray, or my next lighter gray rather, my next lighter gray value. So next, my next step after I've finished all of these areas is I would go in with this next value and I would paint in this value, my number 3 value for my next darkest value. And then finally, for the very last areas that are white in my painting, I'm gonna use my number 4 value. And you wanna make sure that if you're moving on from one value to another, you don't ever paint an area that's next to a wet area because it'll bleed. So that's one reason I'm not demonstrating all the steps in a row right now, because my painting's just too wet to do it all at once without it kind of bleeding out. The other thing is you might want to leave the whites of the eyes. And if your person has teeth, any pure whites of the teeth, you might want to leave those pure white rather than doing those your lightest value. It'll add a little bit more contrast and really make those areas pop. So I do recommend that too. So from there, I'll let you keep going. I will try to add one more video showing me actually completing the rest of these steps, but I'm not going to walk you through it. It'll just be a silent video of me painting. So good luck, and I look forward to seeing your portraits.